I begin with you. Good afternoon, Congressman. We've got a background check deal. It is a real step forward. But the NRA, in its infinite wisdom, says expanding background checks at gun shows will not prevent the next shooting, will not solve violent crime, will not keep our kids safe in schools. I have to say, sir, for once, I think I agree with the NRA. They're right, aren't they? We do need to do much more.
They're absolutely right. We need to do much more. But one thing that they've been advocating that I don't think we need to do is arm school teachers. Listen, I think the president's right. I mean, this is a step forward. But it's a very small step forward, driven primarily, Martin, I think this is the important thing. We have families from Newtown and Sandy Hook that are down here lobbying. We've had a great effort that has been ongoing. I know Stephen Barton is there on the show as well, but it's been that pressure from the outside when 91% of the American people agree with universal background checks. Any step forward is welcome, but still we see the threat of filibuster in the Senate, and whether or not the House decides to take it up, the pressure has to continue to build. This is a good step forward, and I think it's going to be encouraging to people to see that progress can be made, but we have to remain persistent in making sure that we get after all the things that the president has called for in a very common sense manner that isn't going to take away anyone's gun, but it's going to make it safer for our children. This is a question between our children and the gun lobby, and who's going to prevail ultimately.
Absolutely, Congressman. Stephen, there's still considerable pushback against this. I want to play you something that Senator Ted Cruz said earlier on Laura Ingram's radio show. Take a listen to this, Steve.
The administration is, I think, really playing on emotions, but what they're not focused on is actual policies that will stop violent crime. And you've got the horrific tragedy in Newtown, which the administration is, I think, trying to take advantage of.
So, Stephen, Newtown is being taken advantage of. Do you feel that you're being taken advantage of as a survivor wounded in that movie theater in Aurora?
No, absolutely not. And after working with so many of these Newtown families, I can tell you they feel the same way. You know, they've come to this issue through their own tragic circumstances and entirely voluntarily.
So you're not being manipulated by the president and manipulated by anti-gun activists? That is the clear suggestion from Senator Ted Cruz.
No, of course not. And to be honest, what motivates me is the statements of elected leaders like him who, you know, are frankly insulting the memories of the loved ones of these families and so many other families that have been affected by gun violence all across this country.
What do you mean insulted, Steve?
Well, I mean, to say that law could change the outcome of any violent act, I mean, is basically that's an indictment of the existing background check system. You know, and I wonder when Senator Cruz will introduce legislation that will repeal the NICS, Improvement Act, that will repeal the Brady bill. Because if none of these laws are going to make a difference, then why even bother with background checks in the first place?
Indeed. Congressman Larson, of course, some senators remain intensely opposed, as you've hinted, to even the background check compromise. I wonder if you might listen to Senator Jim Inhofe, who spoke this afternoon. Take a listen, sir.
Somehow we think that the criminal element will single out this one law to comply with. You can pass all the laws that you want, and the criminal element is going to sit back and smile.
So, Congressman, criminals will break the law, so why bother? I guess we should abandon the entire penal code, stand down law enforcement, close all the courthouses, right? Is that right?
Well, you know, Martin, I have to say, with respect to the Senate, what is incredibly disheartening and what is criminal is when any fifth grader listening into this knows that there are a majority of votes in the Senate, that there are a majority of American people who not only agree with universal background checks, but also agree with the ban on assault military-type weapons and large capacity clips and want all of the mental health and culture of violence issues addressed. And there is a majority within the Senate, and I believe within the House, to do it. But in the Senate, the crime is that you say they can't even have a debate unless 60 people agree to the debate. pretty restrictive in a democratic society.
One would have thought so. Stephen, if I might go back to you, the First Lady was in Chicago today talking about gun violence, and she spoke about a young woman who marched in the inaugural parade for her husband and was tragically shot and killed at the age of 15. Steve, take a listen to the First Lady.
And as I visited with the Pendleton family at Haidia's funeral, I couldn't get over how familiar they felt to me. Because what I realized was Haidia's family was just like my family. Haidia Pendleton was me.
Steve, that obviously hit the First Lady very hard, and yet the fact is the death of Haidia Pendleton, that kind of tragedy, continues to happen every single day in this country.
You know, I think the issue, or one of the issues we have here is a lack of empathy. You know, we have elected leaders in the Senate and the House of Representatives who, you know, insist on obstructing any reform at all because, frankly, they don't know the true toll of gun violence in the way that families who have been directly affected by it, in the way that survivors have been affected by it, in the way that, you know, people living in the South Side of Chicago have been affected by it. And these people, I assure you, are crying out for change. And we're asking for the rest of the American public, that 9 in 10, you know, 90% of Americans who agree with us, to call on their congressmen for change.
Stephen Barton, thank you, and Congressman John Larson, who is compassionate and concerned for all his constituents and indeed people throughout this country. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the President.